Does Dial of Destiny live up to the Indiana Jones trilogy? Is it at least better than Crystal Skull? Hopefully, maybe.
I think you're going to find very few people who think that Crystal Skull was better than this.
We're bringing you the critical consensus on all the big questions you may have about this weekend's biggest film, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Spoiler free. Let's do it. Welcome back to another Review Lab. I am Spencer J. Gilbert.
And I am Fandom's film critic, Eric Goldman.
So let's dive right in. We went through over a dozen reviews for the new Indiana Jones film. We checked out all of Metacritic's top outlets to see where they stood on all the hot button issues, all the hot takes, all the most devious debates possible. So the first one that popped out at me after going through these is Harrison Ford. Does he still have the juice? Is he too old for this ish? Yeah, it's pretty unanimous, it turns out. Most critics said that Harrison Ford is actually great in this film. The one who said no said that he seemed disengaged, but he's 80 years old, so give him a break. Where did you end up on this question, Eric?
No, I think he did. I mean, I think, his love for this character has always been interesting to chart because he famously doesn't really care that much about Han Solo as a character, but is all in on Indiana Jones, deeply loves the character. I mean, I remember when Crystal Skull came out, again, 15 years ago, people were like, oh, is he going to be phoning it in? Is he going to be like the tired Harrison Ford we'd sometimes see in interviews? And he wasn't. Well, we have plenty to say about that movie, Crystal Skull, but I think Harrison Ford did bring it, and I think he still brings it here in a movie where, yeah, he's 80, and the movie acknowledges that he is an older guy. I'll say you should look at my interview with Harrison Ford on Fandom.com, but he talked about it there, that it's like he wanted this movie to acknowledge the age of the character while still showing, what he could do, and I think he completely brings it. I think very few people would have a problem with him coming out of this, like saying, "Oh, it was embarrassing. They shouldn't have done another one with him," because I think he's really into the character, and you can also see a movie that's like, let's acknowledge this guy can't do everything he once could.
Totally, yeah. So this is directed by James Mangold, a professional when it comes to movies about people who are getting way too old for their parts, as he did with Hugh Jackman in Logan. And look, I love Mangold's films. As a dad myself, I feel like he's making some of the best dad movies out there. Ford v. Ferrari, Copland, that's a favorite of mine. So I was actually pretty excited to see that he was the replacement for Spielberg in this franchise. But how do you think he filled those shoes? Can he live up to a director that's so legendary and so tied to this franchise? Most of the critics commented on this exact thing. 3 of them said, yeah, he lived up to it. Yet a stronger majority, 8 said no. A tough hill to climb. Eric, what say you? How does Mangold compare to Spielberg on this one?
I mean, Mangold is a great director in his own right. He is not Steven Spielberg. He has his own thing going. And it's interesting him taking over a series that is so defined by one director. Only one guy has directed it up till this point. And he does, I think, a solid job. No one, like I said, can be Spielberg. I don't think he matches Spielberg in the action scenes. They are solid. They are good. There's one in particular I thought was really fun. I don't think it lives up to that sort of Spielberg energy, if you will. But I think the movie overall does capture the indie vibe. I think especially with the character stuff and these moments of Indy interacting with people in his life, it feels right. It doesn't feel like off or anything. And I know it's funny with Indiana Jones, we graded on 2 scales, right? The original trilogy scale and the Crystal Skull scale. And I will say he did better than Spielberg on the Crystal Skull scale, because I just rewatched all those movies. And I think Crystal Skull really stands out as maybe Spielberg's heart wasn't in that one. I can't speak for the man. It just feels like maybe he did it because he felt obliged to, not because he was passionate about it anymore. I do think James Mangold brings more passion to it. And so I do think it's, the directorially, it's much stronger than Crystal Skull. No, it's not Spielberg at his 80s indie peak, but what is? Sure. It's, I say, yeah, I agree with the majority saying he doesn't quite live up to it, but I also don't say like, and damn him, he crapped up the joint. Like it's decent what he did as far as, taking someone who's that iconic a director and started stepping into his shoes.
We'll get into the Crystal Skull of it all in a little bit. But something, and again, no spoilers, but something that appears in this movie and kind of reminds me of Crystal Skull is maybe some artifacts or some genre tones that maybe people think don't belong in an Indiana Jones movie, specifically the movie's artifact that comes together in the third act, seems to be something that critics were saying was out of place in an Indiana Jones movie. Again, we won't get into too many specifics, but we looked at what critics thought if the artifact twist worked, if they mentioned it at all. Only 1 thought it was a good decision, while 5 said no, and 7 didn't chime in on it. What say you, Eric? Did this feel non-indie to you?
This is where I strongly, I guess, disagree with the people saying no. I was really into it. And again, mileage will vary. And also it's like, because I just rewatched this series, I thought, wow, it's really funny rewatching like the first movie. What does the artifact do? It melts faces when you open it up. By the third movie, there's an immortal knight. We just accept that Indiana Jones met a guy who's been alive for hundreds of years. And I know for Crystal Skull, aliens were a bridge too far for a lot of people. I actually didn't have an issue with aliens in like ethereally. I just didn't think it was done well in that movie, like a lot of things. So without getting into what the Dial of Destiny does and whatnot, I'll say I really enjoyed where this movie went with its artifact, but I get it's going to be polarizing. It's going to be divisive.
As long as it's not a multiverse thing. Is it a multiverse thing?
I'm not
no spoilers, but just like blink twice with the multiverse
not confirm
thing.
Nor deny.
Okay, fair. All right, so let's wrap up with this. Let's see where Dial of Destiny falls in the ranking of all the Indiana Jones movies. If we could bring those up, first up, or lowest, with the lowest Metascore is, believe it or not Crystal Skull, but Temple of Doom with a 57. I was shocked. How is this the worst Indiana Jones movie?
Yeah, this is madness, I say. And I do think the one thing I think that really sticks out is we have a low review sample size here. I was looking at the numbers of how many people have reviews on Metacritic for this movie, and it's only 14 because they're almost all from 1984. And I do think you have a movie that did not live up to Raiders of the Lost Ark, and people would have been saying, this one's not as great as Raiders. Now, it stood the test of time, and people might complain about Willie Scott in certain aspects, but I think we're also like, what a great adventure movie looking back. It is crazy to me that it is last place. I think we would all expect Crystal Skull to be last place. And I think if you were to go out and poll most people today, that's what they would say.
Let's see what is second to last. It's a Dial of Destiny, folks. It's the second to last on Metacritic, as far as reviewers say. I guess we just got to ask straight up, what's the better film, this or Crystal Skull?
Easily this, Okay. So to say, I think this is a really good Indiana Jones movie. Not great, but a really good Indiana Jones movie. I think, look, you will find people, we all disagree, we all have our opinions. I think you're going to find very few people who think that Crystal Skull was better than this. I think that will be a minority opinion. So, I think you can already tell Crystal Skull is rated higher than this. And that is pretty crazy. We can talk a bit in a second about why that might be. But I think that, this is easily a better movie. It just feels way more confident. And also, it's just such a better final movie for Indy. Harrison Ford's been very adamant that no matter what Disney decides as a corporation to do with the character, this is his last movie as this version of the character. This is a way more satisfying send-off. And I think people will mostly agree with that.
Nice. Well, this is also wild to me. Box, bring up the next two. It's Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and see what Last Crusade scores as well, which is the next one, because they're tied. Crystal Skull and Last Crusade. That's inexplicable to me. Except, like you said, the context matters, because critics coming off of Last Crusade, 10 years, 15 years pass, probably more, and then Crystal Skull comes out, and you're just happy to have Indiana Jones back on your screen.
I think there is that. I think that there's actually a lot of movies, and I'm not saying I love or hate necessarily any, we can talk another time about what I think about these movies, but there's movies like Phantom Menace, Prometheus, and maybe Crystal Skull too, that I think people assume got trashed when they opened, that didn't necessarily get trashed. And there was more of an initial like, oh, I like this aspect, or it's good to see this universe again. And then you kind of get a lot more like, wait a second, this is off, this doesn't work. And so I think maybe people were a little more gentle on Crystal Skull right when it opened, even though I was just talking to someone how I remember sitting watching it being like, oh no, this isn't working, but I still was trying to convince myself I was having a great time. So yeah, I think that might be part of it. It is still absolutely crazy, I understand, in a vacuum to look at this and be like, Temple of Doom, lower than Crystal Skull. That's the science doesn't add up here, but I do understand that there is a lot of context.
Yeah, and just for completion's sake, Raiders of the Lost Ark, obviously number one with a bullet. In my opinion, a perfect film. Mm-hmm. Only an 85, but an 85 on Metacritic is a must see.
Yes.
So there you go. I think that's really all you need to know before you go see Dial of Destiny or not at the theaters overall. It's tracking for in the 140, 150 million dollar range, which sounds like a lot until you remember this movie cost $300 million to make.
Yeah, and that's worldwide. It's tracking for that. So yeah, domestically in Indy's heyday might have come and gone. But I will say, yeah, I do think that this is a good movie, a good send-off for Indiana Jones. Again, it's a little too long. It's probably about 15 minutes could have been trimmed from this movie. A couple of characters feel like they got rewritten in a weird way that, like, why are they still in this movie? It felt like they were going somewhere and they didn't. But I think as far as Indiana Jones himself, it does right by him and it leaves on such a better note. I like the final scene of the movie. I'm like, oh, I'm glad we had this journey with Indiana Jones, a character I love, versus Crystal Skull being like,
they brought him for Mutt now.
right. And I think that is how I hope that most people will come out of this. I think the original trilogy stands alone, of course, but this is a nice coda, a nice let's see this guy we dug one more time.
There you go. So I think this is safe to say your last chance to see Harrison Ford as Indy on the big screen. So go check it out. It seems like it's worth a watch. I will. I got a big backlog, but I'm not going to go see The Flash again. Come on. So I think this is my pick for this weekend too. But what are you going to watch this week? And if you saw Indy, what do you think? Let us know in the comments below. Let us know your ranking. Is this truly better or worse than Crystal Skull? And we'll see you right here next time on Review Lab. Thanks for watching.